What fact blows your mind every time? The sound made by the Krakatoa volcanic eruption in 1883 was so loud it ruptured eardrums of people 40 miles away, traveled around the world 4 times, and was clearly heard 3,000 miles away. That's like you standing in New York and hearing a sound from San Francisco. I remember hearing that it was like this. Imagine you're in Central Park, New York, and you hear a loud bang noise, about as loud as a gunshot noise from a couple yards away, and then later finding out that sound came from Ireland. That's how loud it was. The symbol for division is just a blank fraction with dots replacing the numbers. I learned this about a week ago, and I'm still wondering how I never noticed. What? People who are born deaf and happen to be schizophrenic have some weird experiences. Someone born deaf, that has never been able to hear, uses sign language as their actual language, not a representative language, like the sign for water just as water, not the sign for water. When these people are schizophrenic and hear voices, they actually see disembodied hands floating in mid-air signing to them. What the actual hell? That's some crazy stuff. Right. That blew my mind when I first read. Another fact I learned around the same time is that people who are 100% blind don't see black, they see nothing. Like if you close one eye, assuming you can see out of 2 eyes, one eye can see and the other just sees nothing. Not black, nothing. So, when you close your eyes and see black, you are still seeing black. Blind people don't see that, they see nothing all the time. Blew my mind. You can hear the difference between hot and cold water while it is pouring. You knew it intuitively even though you didn't know it consciously. This concept is actually kind of terrifying. It means that our brain is drawing correlations between what it perceives as related phenomena. Sometimes it's right, like with the water, but how often is it wrong? How many false equivalencies has my brain concluded after a lifetime of sensing patterns between things that may not actually be connected? How would I even begin to recognize that my intuitions are wrong when I'm not consciously aware of what has shaped them? When it's so quiet you can hear snow falling, you're actually hearing the static discharge of the snowflake hitting the ground. It gathers the electricity while it's falling to earth. You know, the sound of snow falling is actually what I consider one of the most coveted sounds. It's one of those sounds you are able to associate with memories and always brings back memories. It's right next to the sound, or lack thereof, after a heavy snowfall. Especially so when away from the city. When everyone's asleep, and there is no sound because the snow dampens everything. I would recommend anyone to take a ski trip even without the desire to ski, simply because the atmosphere is real serene when you stare at the stars, in say Vermont, after a snowfall. That the pillars of creation, of which the first Hubble pictures were taken in 1995, hasn't existed in 6,000 years. When they first measured Everest, it was a bizarrely round number, so they added a few fake inches so people would be more likely to believe them. 2 feet, actually, making the surveyor the first person to put 2 feet on the top of Everest. Same thing with body counts during the Vietnam War. 600. 600? 598. That sounds better. From the time it was discovered, 1930, to the time it was declassified as a planet, 2006, Pluto didn't complete even one revolution around the Sun. Therefore, while on Earth Pluto was a planet for 76 years, from a Plutonian frame of reference it was a planet for less than a third of a year. Hey Pluto, you here? Those Earthlings said you're a planet now. Huh, that's kinda neat. 4 Pluto months later. Oh, looks like they changed their minds, man. Huh, well, I suppose it was fun while it lasted. Guess I'll get back to work. The Sun is 400 times wider than the Moon, but also 400 times as far away, so they appear to be the same size in our sky. Orcas are natural predators of moose. When moose swim between islands in Alaska, the orcas eat them. The fact that moose swim between islands in Canada is about as mind-blowing as the fact that orcas prey on them. All planets in the solar system fit between the Earth and the Moon, the Sun does not. When I first heard this I thought it was bullshit. But when I looked it up, wow, I didn't realize how far away the Moon is. I couldn't believe that even Jupiter would fit, let alone all of the other planets as well. Cheetahs don't roar, they meow. like house cats. To add on to this, mountain lions don't meow or roar, they scream. If I were a native and I heard that, I would think it was a Wendigo too. If Bill Gates were to live to 90, he could spend $8 million a day for the rest of his life and still have over $1 billion at the time of his death. Edit. It turns out he makes just over $4 billion a year in interest. Gravity affects time. Want to get even weirder? Because gravity affects time. Before the Big Bang, the time didn't flow. And yet somehow something happened. A reaction without an action. The T-Rex lived closer in time to us than it did to the Stegosaurus. Millions of years is an extremely hard thing to grasp with my incredibly mortal mind. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, you may be entitled to financial compensation. You never actually listen to your true voice, because of bone conduction. When you speak, you hear your own voice through vibrations inside your skull set off by your vocal cords, according to the BBC. Those vibrations travel up through your bony skull and again set the eardrum vibrating. However, as they travel through the bone, they spread out and lower in pitch, giving you a false sense of bass. Then when you hear a recording of your voice, it sounds distinctly higher. That's why it always sounds like shit when you listen to your recorded voice. Also, you have a false image of yourself in your mind because you are used to seeing a mirrored image of yourself. That's why you always prefer to flip your selfie. Some phones' apps have this turned on by default. So basically, your mind doesn't even know itself. Bill Gates has a net worth of $72 billion, roughly $115 per second, so it would be a bad investment for Bill Gates to stop and pick up a $100 bill on the floor. No, it wouldn't, because he's not gaining that money because of his actions, therefore the $100 would just be extra. Somewhere in Pi is my phone number, and your phone number. We need to start a petition to remove everybody's phone numbers from Pi. Enough is enough. Babies don't have kneecaps. Spent like 10 minutes examining daughter's knees. No kneecap. We didn't really know what a hurricane looked like until the 1960s. I don't know about blowing my mind every time, but I read that last week and it struck me how far we've come in a short time. The first flight into the eye of a hurricane was during the 1943 Surprise Hurricane. An American and British crew flew into the eye to show it could be done. The hurricane is known as the Surprise Hurricane because it took so long to relay information between various branches of the government due to the secrecy demands of the Second World War that there was almost no warning before the hurricane made landfall. The first broadcast of a hurricane tracked by radar came in early September 1961, when a young and unknown Dan Rather took a crew into a weather station to film and broadcast the radar image of a hurricane. This seemed to have changed the public's perspective on just how big these storms could get. Finally, later in that same September, Hurricane Esther became the first satellite discovered by satellite imagery. I've been thinking about this the past couple weeks. That first satellite image must have been a real, holy shit, moment. That California's population is more than my entire country, Canada. There are villages in China that have a higher population count than my whole country. My parents went to China and talked to a guy from a small town, like my parents. It was something like 4 million people. He was shocked when my parents told him their town was only 10,000. That cumulus clouds weigh 1.1 million pounds. Old, but still crazy that much water is floating above us at times. Even more interesting that they all weigh the same amount. Infinite does not mean all-inclusive. There are an infinite amount of numbers between 3 to 4, but none of those are 5. If we had a minute's silence for every person killed during the Second World War, both military and civilian, we would be in silence for roughly 112 years. France was still executing people by guillotine when Star Wars was released. Christopher Lee witnessed the last public execution by guillotine. I think it's also on video. Lee lived an interesting life. That Niagara Falls has stopped flowing twice in recorded history naturally. Didn't just stop, it froze. Lobsters live forever if nothing kills them. They don't age. There's other things too that don't age, but they are simpler organisms. Lobsters are reasonably complex. It sounds simple, but the implications of this are immense. There is a genetic combination where it is possible to regenerate cells indefinitely and live forever under the right conditions. Medical technology is nowhere near this right now, but the fact that it exists on Earth under laws of nature means immortality is not sci-fi. It is simply a matter of technology which can be achieved at some point in the future. It's like finding a cricket that can jump back and forth through time and no one noticed this whole time. It's proof it's possible. What fact blows your mind? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.